Monumental Moments, where we live to multiply His movement. I'm Melissa Machenbacher, and this is a place we passionately pursue and proclaim Jesus. Today's monumental moment on the Fuel for the Harvest podcast is titled, That's a Nice Boulder. Well, when my kids were younger, they used to love to watch animated movies, and one of their favorite movies from the early 2000s was Shrek. They had favorite scenes throughout the movie that they couldn't wait to see, and they usually always revolved around Donkey. One that they put on repeat, constantly stopping, rewinding, and rewatching, was when Donkey was walking up with Shrek through the forest and comes upon Shrek's modest home for the very first time. As the scene is played over and over, I continually heard, "I like that boulder. That is a nice boulder," as Donkey tried to backpedal from previous comments from Shrek's home. The quote would often echo throughout our home, laced with giggles and copycat repeats from my children. That is a nice boulder. It's an interesting comment, isn't it? Often people don't recognize rocks and boulders at first glance. I was reading in Mark 16 lately, and I read about a large boulder, but not a welcomed one. Mark 16, 1-8 says, When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they went saying to one another, Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back. It was very large. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. And he said to them, Do not be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, but they were afraid. You see, at this time, people realized that Jesus was crucified, died on the cross, was buried, and a large stone had been rolled in front of the tomb. When the Sabbath had passed, as soon as they could, at sunrise, 3 compassionate women gathered to purchase spices and to go to the tomb together to anoint the lifeless body of Jesus. In reading the story for many years, I never really caught the timing, the urgency, and even the conversation that was happening with these women on the way to the tomb that morning. In conversation, they asked, Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? It's documented in the scripture that it was a very large stone. I'm sure this was a huge boulder. I doubt the women were found saying, That is a nice boulder. As you probably already know, stones and large rocks and boulders can be extravagantly heavy, especially stones large enough to cover an entrance of a tomb. The women were trying to create a plan on their way to the tomb with their valued, newly purchased spices to get inside and anoint the precious body of Jesus. As they looked up, they saw the stone had already been rolled away. Imagine their amazement and confusion at the same time. They were just talking about who was going to move this boulder, and then they look up and see the stone had already been rolled away. They learn that Jesus is no longer there, but he has risen from the dead. Scriptures say that they fled from the tomb as trembling and astonishment seized them. They went from devising a plan to move a boulder to get to Jesus to fleeing in astonishment after a young man in the tomb told them that Jesus was not there. Have you ever been faced with heavy things that seem virtually impossible to move, wondering how on earth you can move them? Are there boulders in your life keeping you from Jesus that you need to pray for him to remove? It's time to look up, raise your gaze, and know through the power of his resurrection, the stone has been rolled away. He has made a way for you to have direct access to him. Let's examine and ask the Lord how he can remove the boulders in our life that are keeping us at a distance from him. Look up and focus on the King of Kings in the fullness of his resurrected glory. Remind yourself of the sacrifice, the price that was paid, and the redeeming love that tore the veil and rolled the stone away to remove the barriers between you and the Lord. How can you make monumental moments and live to multiply his movement today?